3 days after the battle that was not a battle, the Galactic Council fleet finally arrived at Vareth Station and found something that none of them had expected. Peace the Kef blockade had been lifted, and what remained of Admiral Torvex's fleet was holding position while repair crews worked frantically to restore damaged vessels. The Iron Circle operatives had been arrested and were awaiting trial for conspiracy and treason against the Dominion, and somewhere in the medical bay of the Keth flagship, a human woman was fighting for her life. Siren had survived 3 hours of constant high-gravity maneuvering in a shuttle that was never designed for combat. Her body had paid the price. Multiple fractures from acceleration stress, internal bleeding from sustained G-forces, and neural damage from the interface that had kept her connected to the Keth systems throughout the engagement. The Keth doctors had never treated a human before, but they were doing their best to keep her alive. Nethri stood outside the medical bay and waited for news. And he was still standing there when Station Commander Voreth arrived with a delegation from the Galactic Council. The Council wishes to speak with the human responsible for ending this crisis. Voreth said, "She is unconscious," Nethri replied, "and the doctors are not certain when she will wake." "What she did was impossible," one of the council delegates said, his tone somewhere between awe and fear. A single human against 500 warships. And she won without firing a weapon. "She did not win," Nethri said quietly. "She survived. And she gave us the chance to make a choice that saved lives instead of destroying them." "You speak of her with respect," the delegate observed. "She earned it," Nethri said. The conversation was interrupted by movement from inside the medical bay, and a Keth doctor emerged with exhaustion written across every scale of his face. "She is awake," he said, "and she is asking for the young officer." Nethri entered the medical bay alone. Siren lay on a bed designed for patients twice her size, surrounded by medical equipment that beeped and hummed in languages she did not understand. She looked small and fragile and utterly human, which made what she had accomplished even more remarkable. "You kept your promise," she said when she saw him. "You helped me stop the war. You kept yours as well," Nethri replied. "You gave us a chance instead of simply destroying us when you had the power to do so. I am tired of destruction." Siren said, "I have seen too much of it already." Nethri sat down beside her bed and studied her face. "You promised to tell me who you really are," he said. Siren was quiet for a long moment. "I was a soldier," she said finally. "A special kind of soldier that my government does not acknowledge exists." "A phantom," Nethri said. Her eyes widened slightly. "How do you know that name?" "There are rumors among our intelligence services," Nethri explained. "Stories of human operatives who can turn entire armies against themselves without ever being seen. I thought those stories were exaggerations," he continued. "I thought they were propaganda designed to make other species fear humanity." He looked at her with something like wonder. "I was wrong." Siren closed her eyes. "I retired 15 years ago," she said. "I walked away from everything and tried to become someone normal." "Why?" Nethri asked. "Because I was afraid of what I had become," she said. "I was afraid that if I kept doing what I was trained to do, I would forget how to be human. And yet you came back." Nethri said, "I came back because 3 million people needed someone to save them," Siren said. "And I was the only one who could." She opened her eyes and looked at him directly. "I will probably spend the rest of my life wondering if I made the right choice. But at least those people are alive to wonder the same thing." A knock on the door interrupted them, and Station Commander Voreth entered with a datapad in his hands. "The Galactic Council wishes to honor you for your actions," he said to Siren. "They are offering medals and commendations and a position as a special advisor on human-alien relations." Siren shook her head. "I do not want medals," she said. "And I do not want positions." "What do you want?" Voreth asked. Siren thought about the question for a long time. "I want to go home," she said finally. I want to walk through streets where no one knows my name. And I want to live a quiet life surrounded by people who have never heard of phantoms or blockades or galactic conspiracies. After everything you have done, you just want to disappear, Vorith said, sounding confused. The best heroes are the ones who never wanted to be heroes at all, Siren said. We do what we must because no one else can, and then we fade away so that the people we saved can live without fear. Nethri understood. I will make sure your name is never mentioned in the official records, he said. As far as the galaxy knows, this crisis was resolved through diplomatic channels, and the Keth fleet stood down due to internal political pressure. Thank you, Siren said 2 weeks later. Siren walked through the marketplace on Vareth Station one last time. The crowds had returned, and millions of beings from dozens of species moved through the corridors, buying and selling and living their lives as if nothing had happened. They did not know her face. They did not know her name. They did not know that the human woman walking among them had saved all of their lives without ever asking for recognition. A child from a species Siren did not recognize bumped into her and nearly fell. And Siren caught the small being before it hit the ground. I am sorry, the child said in a language that her translator rendered as musical and bright. It is all right, Siren said with a smile. The child's parent appeared a moment later, apologizing profusely for the disruption. Siren waved off the apologies and helped the family find their way to the transport hub they were looking for. Then she continued walking. Just another face in the crowd, just another human in a galaxy full of wonders and dangers and possibilities. Her shuttle was waiting at docking port 17, and it would take her home to Earth where she could finally rest. As she walked, she passed a news screen that was broadcasting the official story of the Vareth crisis. The anchor was explaining how diplomatic pressure and internal Keth politics had combined to resolve the standoff peacefully. There was no mention of a single human in a maintenance shuttle. There was no mention of 500 warships turning on each other. There was no mention of Phantom 7 or the ghost who had saved 3 million lives. Siren smiled and kept walking. Let the galaxy believe whatever it wanted to believe. She knew the truth, and that was enough behind her. The station continued its eternal dance through the stars, and the people who lived there went about their lives without ever knowing how close they had come to annihilation somewhere in the Keth Dominion. Nethri was building a new career based on the lessons he had learned from a human woman who refused to give up somewhere in the shadows. The remnants of the Iron Circle were facing justice for their crimes, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the story of the day when 500 warships faced a single human was already becoming legend. But Yoon Siren did not care about legends. She cared about the child who had bumped into her in the marketplace. She cared about the families who would never know how close they came to death. She cared about the future that was possible because she had chosen to act when no one else could. That was enough. That was always enough. She boarded her shuttle, set a course for Earth, and disappeared into the stars like the ghost she had always been trained to be. The galaxy would remember the crisis at Vareth Station, but the hidden hero who had ended it preferred to be forgotten, and in the end, that was exactly what made her a hero worth remembering. The broadcast hit every ship in the Keth fleet at exactly the same moment, and for 30 seconds the void was filled with the truth. Every communication screen on every vessel displayed the evidence of the Iron Circle's conspiracy. Every officer heard the recordings of their political leaders planning to sacrifice the fleet for profit and power. Every soldier learned that they had been sent to die for a lie, and then Admiral Torvex ordered every communication system in the fleet to shut down, cutting off the broadcast before it could finish. Find the source of that transmission, he roared from the command deck of the Unbroken Claw. "And destroy it." Sensors swept the space around the station, and within minutes they located the small shuttle drifting in the darkness between the two forces, one vessel. The sensor officer reported, "Minimal weapons, minimal shields. Minimal power signature. That is the source." Torvex demanded, "Yes, Admiral," the officer confirmed. Torvex stared at the tiny blip on his tactical display and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen the broadcast before his officers managed to suppress it. He had seen the evidence and recognized the names and understood exactly what it meant, but he could not admit that. He could not accept that his entire career, his entire mission, his entire purpose here was built on manipulation and lies. If he accepted that, he would have to accept that he was a fool, and Admiral Torvex would rather burn a station full of civilians than admit to being a fool. All ships prepare to fire. He commanded, "Destroy that shuttle and then begin bombardment of the station." "Admiral," Nethry said from his position at the secondary tactical console, "the fleet is asking questions about the broadcast. Tell them it was enemy propaganda," Torvex snapped. "Tell them to follow orders or face court-martial, sir." "Some of the captains are requesting verification of our intelligence," Nethry pressed. "They want to know if the Iron Circle connection is true." Torvex turned on him with fury burning in his eyes. "Are you questioning my authority?" "Lieutenant, I am trying to prevent a mistake that will destroy us all," Nethry said. For a moment it seemed like Torvex might strike him down right there on the command deck. Then the sensor officer spoke again, and his voice carried a note of confusion. "Admiral, the shuttle is broadcasting on an open channel and requesting to speak with you directly." "Ignore it," Torvex said. "Sir, the transmission is being received by every ship in the fleet," the officer said. "I cannot block it without shutting down all external communications." Torvex hesitated, and in that hesitation Siren's voice filled the command deck. "Admiral Torvex, this is Yoon Siren of Earth," she said. "I am the one who sent you the evidence of the conspiracy against you, and I am giving you one final chance to stand down before this situation becomes something that neither of us can control." The bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. Torvex grabbed the communication controls himself. "You are one human in a defenseless shuttle," he snarled. "You have no power here." "You are correct. I have no weapons that can match your fleet," Siren replied. "But I do not need weapons to defeat you, Admiral." "You are insane," Torvex said. "Perhaps," Siren agreed. "But I have been doing this for a very long time, and I have learned that the biggest armies are always the most vulnerable." "Vulnerable to what?" Torvex demanded. "To themselves," Siren said. The communication ended, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the Keth destroyer Crimson Fury opened fire on its neighboring vessel without warning. The command deck of the Unbroken Claw erupted into chaos. "What is happening?" Torvex shouted. "The Crimson Fury's targeting systems have malfunctioned," the tactical officer reported. "They are firing on friendly vessels." "Order them to cease fire," Torvex commanded. "I cannot reach them." "Sir, their communications are not responding." More ships began firing at random, their weapons targeting allies instead of the distant shuttle or the station. The Keth Fleet Coordination Network, designed to allow 500 ships to operate as a single unit, had become infected with something that turned every advantage into a weakness. Ships that relied on automated targeting found their systems locked onto friendly signatures. Vessels that depended on centralized command received contradictory orders that sent them crashing into each other. Communications between captains dissolved into static and confusion in her shuttle. Siren worked the neural interface with the focus of someone who had done this many times before. The encryption protocols that Nethri had provided gave her access to the fleet's coordination systems, and from there she had uploaded a cascade of malicious code designed to exploit every vulnerability in Keth military architecture. She was not fighting the fleet with weapons. She was fighting it with information. Every time a ship tried to target her shuttle, she spoofed its sensors into thinking she was somewhere else. Every time a commander tried to restore order, she intercepted the transmission and replaced it with contradictory instructions. Every time the Keth tried to use their superior numbers as an advantage, she turned those numbers into chaos. The battle lasted 3 hours, and it was the strangest engagement in galactic military history. 500 warships tore themselves apart, while a single human in a VO maintenance shuttle danced through the destruction like a ghost. 73 Keth vessels were destroyed or disabled by friendly fire. Another 140 suffered critical damage from collisions and misfired weapons. The rest fell into such complete disarray that they could barely maintain formation, let alone coordinate an attack on the command deck of the Unbroken Claw. Admiral Torvex watched his fleet crumble and finally understood what he was facing. This was not a diplomat. This was not a simple human caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was something that his species had never encountered before, a weapon that did not kill directly, but turned everything it touched into an instrument of destruction. A single mind that could match 500 ships because it did not need to destroy them. It only needed to make them destroy themselves. Admiral Nethri said quietly, "The fleet is broken, and if we continue this course of action, we will lose everything." Torvex did not respond. "The evidence is real," Nethri continued. "The Iron Circle used us, and they will abandon us the moment we are no longer useful to them." "I know," Torvex said, and his voice was hollow. "Then end this," Nethri urged. "Arrest the Iron Circle agents on this ship. Broadcast a ceasefire and give our people a chance to survive." Torvex looked at his tactical display and saw the ruins of his ambition floating in the void. He looked at his officers and saw fear and doubt and exhaustion. He looked at the tiny shuttle still drifting through the chaos, and he understood that he had lost to a single human who had never fired a single shot. "All ships cease fire," he said finally. "This is Admiral Torvex ordering an immediate cessation of all hostile activity." The guns fell silent. "Lieutenant Nethri, you are hereby authorized to arrest the Iron Circle operatives aboard this vessel and any others we can identify throughout the fleet." "Yes, Admiral," Nethri said. "And contact that shuttle," Torvex added. "I want to speak with the human who just dismantled my fleet with nothing but a communication array and a death wish." The communication channel opened, but there was no response. "Sir, the shuttle's power signature is failing," the sensor officer reported. "Life support is critical. Send a rescue team," Torvex ordered. "Admiral," one of his officers protested. "She is the enemy. She is the only reason any of us are still alive," Torvex said. "Because if she had wanted us dead, she would have crashed our ships into each other instead of just disabling them." He stared at the dying shuttle and felt something that might have been respect. "That human gave us a choice when she could have given US annihilation," he said. "The least we can do is save her life in return." 15 years ago, Yoon Sirin had been someone else entirely. She remembered the training facility on a moon that did not officially exist, hidden beneath kilometers of ice where no satellite could find it. She remembered the instructors who pushed her beyond every limit she thought she had, breaking her down and rebuilding her into something that barely felt human anymore. She remembered the designation they gave her when she completed the program Phantom 7. The Phantom program was humanity's answer to a galaxy full of species that were bigger and stronger and more technologically advanced. Earth could not compete with alien fleets or alien weapons or alien soldiers. But Earth had learned something that other species seemed to overlook. Wars were not always won by the strongest army. Sometimes they were won by the soldier that no one saw coming. The phantoms were trained to infiltrate and manipulate and destroy from within, turning enemy assets against themselves without ever firing a shot. They were ghosts that moved through the galaxy, leaving chaos in their wake. And their existence was denied by every human government that knew about them. Saren had been one of the best. Her final mission had taken her to a world called Vareth Prime, where two alien species were preparing for a war that would have dragged humanity into a conflict they could not survive. Her orders were simple. Stop the war by any means necessary. She had succeeded. The cost had been her team, her identity, and something essential in her soul that she had never been able to recover. After that mission, she had walked away from everything and reinvented herself as a minor diplomatic attaché. Someone invisible and unimportant who would never have to make those kinds of choices again. For 15 years it had worked. Now the universe had found her again, and the old skills were waking up inside her like muscle memory that refused to die. She sat in her quarters on Vareth Station and reviewed the intelligence that Nethri had smuggled to her through encrypted channels. What she found made her blood run cold. The false intelligence about Dr. Hallworth had originated from a Keth political faction called the Iron Circle, a group of extremists who believed that the Dominion had grown weak through peace and needed a great war to restore its strength. They had manufactured the entire crisis to force Admiral Tarvax into a conflict that would destabilize the Galactic Council and create opportunities for expansion. But they were not working. Alone buried in the data were communications with arms dealers from 6 different species, political operatives from governments that officially opposed the Keth, and financial transfers that traced back to corporations that would profit enormously from prolonged warfare. This was not just a Keth conspiracy. This was a galactic conspiracy. And the people behind it had been planning this for years. Siren understood now why she had been unable to get help from Earth. Someone had made sure that her messages never reached the right people. Someone had isolated this station from any possibility of rescue. The only question that remained was what she could do about it. She had 40 hours until Torvax's extended deadline expired, and she had no weapons that could match 500 warships. But she had something else. She had the truth. And she had 15 years of training in how to turn an enemy's strength against them. She opened a communication channel to Nethri. "I need you to do something dangerous," she said when he answered, "Everything. Everything about this situation is dangerous," he replied. "What do you need?" "I need access to the flagship's communication systems," she said. "Specifically the command encryption protocols that coordinate fleet movements." There was a long pause. "That is treason," Nethri said finally. "That is survival," Siren corrected. "The Iron Circle is using Admiral Torvax as a puppet. And when this is over, they will dispose of him just like they will dispose of everyone else who knows too much." "How can you be certain?" Nethri asked. "Because I have seen this before," Siren said. "I have seen what happens when people like them get what they want." She thought about Vareth Prime and the bodies of her teammates and the choices she had made in the darkness of that dying world. "They do not care about the Keth Dominion," she continued. "They care about power and profit, and they will burn your entire civilization to get what they want." Nethri was quiet for a very long time when he spoke again. His voice held something that sounded almost like resolve. "I will get you what you need," he said. "But I want to understand what you are planning to do with it." "I am going to give the Keth fleet a choice," Siren said. "They can follow Admiral Torvax into a war that will destroy them, Or they can see the truth and choose a different path. And if they choose wrong, Nethri asked, then I will do what I was trained to do, Siren said. She ended the communication and opened the hidden compartment in her luggage. One more time, inside were the tools of her former trade, a neural interface that could hack into most alien computer systems, a stealth suit that bent light around the wearer and made them nearly invisible, a collection of electronic warfare devices that could disrupt communications, spoof sensor readings, and turn automated systems against their operators, and a single encrypted transmitter that connected directly to Earth's military command. She picked up the transmitter and composed a message that she had hoped she would never have to send. Phantom 7 requesting emergency authorization, she typed. One operator against 500 targets. She hesitated with her finger over the send button. If she did this, there was no going back. She would be reactivating protocols that had been dormant for 15 years. And she would be committing herself to a course of action that might end with her death. But if she did nothing, 3 million people would die, and the conspirators would win. The choice was not really a choice at all. She pressed send and waited. The response came 3 hours later, encrypted with codes that only Phantoms knew. Authorization granted. It read, Phantom 7 is cleared for independent operation with full tactical discretion. There was a second message attached, and when Siren read it, she felt tears forming in her eyes for the first time in years. We never forgot you, it said. Welcome back. She wiped her eyes and began to prepare. The stealth suit fit perfectly despite 15 years of disuse, conforming to her body like a second skin. The neural interface connected to her nervous system with a familiar burning sensation that brought back memories she had tried to bury. The electronic warfare devices powered up and ran diagnostic checks, confirming that they were still functional. She was not Yoon Siren anymore. She was Phantom 7, and she had a fleet to break. But first, she needed to give them a chance to stand down. She composed a broadcast that would be transmitted across every frequency the Keth used, and she loaded it with all the evidence that Nethri had helped her gather. The truth about the Iron Circle, the truth about the manufactured intelligence, the truth about the conspirators who were using the Keth military as pawns in their game. If the Keth commanders saw this evidence and chose to investigate, the crisis could end without violence. If they refused to listen, then Siren would have to convince them by other means. She set the broadcast to transmit in exactly 20 hours, giving herself time to get into position. Then she walked to the station's maintenance bay and found a small shuttle that no one would miss. The next phase of her plan required her to be in the void between the station and the Keth fleet, alone and vulnerable, and exactly where they would never expect a threat to come from. As she powered up the shuttle systems, she thought about the 3 million people sleeping peacefully on the station behind her. They had no idea that a single human was about to take on 500 warships. They had no idea that their survival depended on skills that Siren had spent 15 years trying to forget. But that was how it always worked with Phantoms. The best victories were the ones that no one ever knew about. She launched the shuttle and flew into the darkness. And behind her, the station grew smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. The second day of negotiations began with Admiral Torvex slamming his fist against the table, hard enough to crack the metal surface. "You're wasting my time," he roared, and his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder trapped in a bottle. Siren did not flinch. "I am trying to save your career," she said calmly. "But if you prefer to throw it away, then please continue shouting." The words hit Torvex like a physical blow, and for a moment the great admiral of the Keth Dominion looked almost uncertain. "What do you know of my career?" he demanded. Siren leaned back in her chair and studied the faces of the officers around the table. And she saw exactly what she had hoped to see: division, fear, ambition. "I know that you have enemies back home," she said. "I know that Counselor Virith has been speaking against you in the High Chamber for months. And I know that this operation was supposed to be a quick victory that would silence your critics forever." Torvex went very still. "How do you know these things?" he asked, and his voice had dropped to something quiet and dangerous. "Because I pay attention," Siren said. "And because humans have been listening to Keth political broadcasts for longer than you realize." This was partially true. Earth's intelligence services had been monitoring Keth communications for decades, and Siren had spent 2 sleepless nights reading every report she could access. Through her diplomatic credentials, the picture they painted was clear enough, Admiral. Torvex was a powerful man surrounded by rivals who wanted to see him fall, and this blockade was his chance to prove his worth to the Dominion. If he succeeded, his position would be secure for decades. If he failed, his enemies would tear him apart. "Let me tell you what I think will happen," Siren continued. "If you bombard this station and kill 3 million civilians, including representatives from 12 different species, you will not be celebrated as a hero." She paused and watched his face carefully. "You will be condemned as a war criminal, and the Galactic Council will demand your head as the price of peace. And your rivals back home will happily sacrifice you to avoid a wider conflict." Torvex said nothing, but the scales along his neck had shifted to a darker color that Siren had learned to recognize as fear. "However," she said, "if you find a diplomatic solution to this crisis, you will return home as the Admiral who achieved Keth objectives without starting a war that the Dominion cannot afford to fight." "The Dominion does not fear war," one of the other officers said. "No," Siren agreed, "but the Dominion does fear economic collapse. And a war with the Galactic Council would close every trade route in this sector for at least 5 years. She turned her attention back to Torvex. "Admiral, I am offering you a way out of this situation that does not end with your death or disgrace. And all I ask in return is time." "Time for what?" Torvex demanded. "Time to find another solution," Siren said. "Time to investigate whether the intelligence that brought you here was accurate in the first place." This was the gamble. If Torvex agreed to extend the deadline, Siren would have the chance to expose the conspiracy that had manufactured this crisis. If he refused, millions would die, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The Admiral stared at her for a long moment, and his eyes were calculating something that only he could see. 48 hours, he said finally. "I will give you 48 additional hours. And if you cannot produce results by then, I will reduce that station to dust and scatter the remains across this entire system." Siren nodded once and rose from her chair. "Thank you, Admiral," she said. "I will not waste this opportunity." As she walked toward the door, she felt someone watching her with unusual intensity. She glanced back and found the young officer named Nethri studying her with eyes that held more intelligence than the others seemed to possess. He knew something or he suspected something. Either way, he was dangerous. She made a mental note to watch him carefully and then left the chamber without looking back. That night, Siren met with Dr. Hallworth in a secure room deep within the station. And what he told her confirmed every suspicion she had been building. "There is no precursor weapons cache," he said, and his voice was hollow with exhaustion and fear. "I never claimed to have found one." "Then where did the Keth get their intelligence?" Siren asked. Hallworth shook his head. "I do not know," he said. 6 months ago, I published a paper about precursor navigation systems, and it mentioned the possible archaeological site in the outer reaches. But I never said anything about weapons. Someone took your research and twisted it." Siren said. "Someone wanted this to happen," Hallworth agreed. "Someone wanted the Keth to attack this station." Siren thought about the 500 warships outside and the 3 million lives hanging in the balance. And she thought about who would benefit from a war between the Keth Dominion and the Galactic Council. Arms dealers would profit from increased military spending. Political extremists would use the conflict to gain power, and somewhere in the shadows, the architects of this conspiracy were watching their plan unfold exactly as intended. I need to find proof, Siren said. If I can show the Keth that they were manipulated, they might stand down, or they might destroy the evidence and kill everyone who knows the truth. Allworth said he was right, and Siren knew it. The Keth were proud and violent and quick to anger, and admitting they had been fooled would be almost impossible for them to accept. She needed another approach. She needed to find someone inside the Keth command structure who was willing to help her. She thought about the young officer with the intelligent eyes, and she began to form a plan. The next morning, Siren requested a private meeting with Lieutenant Nethry under the pretense of discussing cultural exchange protocols. It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. The meeting took place in a small chamber aboard the Keth flagship, and Nethry dismissed his guards. With a wave of his hand, "You are not a diplomat," he said. The moment they were alone, Siren considered lying, but decided against it. "What makes you say that?" she asked instead. "Diplomats do not move the way you move," Nethry said. "They do not watch exits and count weapons and measure distances with their eyes." He stepped closer, and his voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. "I have seen soldiers from many species, and I know what they look like, even when they are pretending to be something else." Siren met his gaze without flinching. "Does it matter what I was?" she asked. "Or does it only matter what I am trying to do now?" "That depends," Nethry said, "on what you are trying to do." "I am trying to prevent a war that will kill millions of people," Siren said, "including many Keth who do not deserve to die for a lie." Nethry was quiet for a moment. "You believe the intelligence is false," he said. "I know it is false," Siren replied. "Dr. Hallworth has no knowledge of precursor weapons, because no such weapons exist." "Then why are we here?" Nethry asked. "Because someone wanted you here," Siren said. "Someone with enough power to plant false intelligence and enough motivation to start a war." The young Keth officer looked away, and Siren saw something in his face that gave her hope. "Doubt. I have wondered the same thing," he admitted. "The intelligence came through channels that I do not trust, and Admiral Torvex was too eager to believe it." "Help me find the truth," Siren said. "Help me expose whoever did this before more people die." Nethry turned back to face her, and his eyes held a decision that had been forming for days. "If I help you and we fail, I will be executed as a traitor," he said. "Yes," Siren agreed. "But if we do nothing, you will have to live with the knowledge that you could have stopped a massacre and chose not to." The silence between them stretched into something heavy and meaningful. Finally, Nethry nodded. "I will help you," he said. "But you must promise me something in return." "Name it," Siren said. "When this is over, you will tell me the truth about who you really are." Siren thought about the equipment hidden in her quarters and the scars on her body and the ghosts that haunted her dreams. "When this is over," she said, "I will tell you everything." The Varus station hung in the darkness of space like a jewel caught between dying stars. And on this day, it had become a prison for 3 million souls. Yoon. Siren stood at the observation deck and watched the fleet that surrounded them. A reflection, a ghost against the transparent wall that separated her from the void. And she counted the ships one by one until she lost track somewhere past 400. The Keth Dominion had sent 500 warships to blockade a single trading station, and every species trapped inside knew what that meant. War had come to find them whether they wanted it or not. "The Council has received our distress signal," said Station Commander Varth. His forearms folded across his chest in a gesture of frustration that Siren had learned to read over years of diplomatic work. But their fleet is 18 days away at maximum speed. Siren turned from the window and looked at the alien commander, noting the way his scales had turned a darker shade of blue since the blockade began 3 days ago, and the Keth ultimatum expires in 69 hours, she said. Varth made a sound that translated poorly into human languages, but carried the weight of despair. They want Dr. Hallworth, he said, and they will kill everyone on this station to get him. Siren knew the story by now because everyone on the station knew it. Dr. Marcus Hallworth was a human scientist who had allegedly discovered the location of an ancient weapons cache left behind by the precursors, a dead civilization whose technology still shaped galactic politics 10,000 years after their extinction. The Keth wanted that technology, and they believed Hallworth could give it to them. What the Keth did not know was that Hallworth had already told Siren the truth. In a private meeting 2 days ago, there was no weapons cache, there was no discovery. Someone had fed the Keth false intelligence, and now 3 million people would die for a lie. I want to speak with the Keth commander, Siren said. Varth stared at her with eyes that held no hope. You are a junior diplomatic attache, he said, and humanity holds no significant political weight in this sector of the galaxy, which is exactly why they might agree to meet with me. Siren replied, because I am not a threat to them, and I am not important enough to be part of any conspiracy. The station commander considered this for a long moment. The Keth do not negotiate, he said finally. Everyone negotiates. Siren said, they just need the right reason. She walked toward the door without waiting for permission, and something in the way she moved made Varth pause. He had seen many humans during his career as station commander, and they all walked with a certain softness that came from evolving on a world with lower gravity than most species preferred. This human walked differently. She walked like someone who knew exactly how much space her body occupied and exactly how quickly she could cross any distance if she needed to attach Yoon. Varth called after her. She stopped but did not turn around. Why do you want to help us? He asked. When your own government has not even responded to our requests for assistance. Siren was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke her voice carried something ancient and tired. Because 3 million people deserve better than to die for someone else's game, she said. Then she was gone, and Varth was left wondering what he had just seen behind her eyes. The Keth flagship was called the Unbroken Claw, and it hung at the center of the blockade, like a predator waiting for its prey to make a mistake. Admiral Torvex stood on the command deck and watched the small shuttle approaching his vessel, and he felt something close to amusement for the first time since this operation began. A human, said his second officer, a younger Keth named Nethri, whose scales still held the bright green color of youth. They have sent a human to negotiate with us. They have sent us an insult, Torvex corrected. But we will accept it because it amuses me to watch lesser species scramble for survival. The shuttle docked without incident, and Torvex ordered his guards to bring the human to the negotiation chamber. When Siren walked through the door, she saw exactly what she expected to see. The chamber was designed to intimidate, with high ceilings that made visitors feel small and lighting that cast harsh shadows across every surface. The Keth officers arranged around the table were all larger than her by at least half a meter, and their natural armor plating caught the light in ways that reminded her of ancient warriors. She had seen worse. She had survived worse. Admiral Torvex, she said, and her voice did not shake even slightly. I am Yoon Siren of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps, and I am here to discuss terms that might prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Torvex leaned forward in his chair, and his teeth were very visible when he spoke. "There is nothing to discuss," he said. "You will give us Dr. Hallworth, or you will all die. With respect, Admiral." "That is not entirely accurate," Siren said. She took a seat without being invited, and several of the Keth officers made sounds of outrage at this breach of protocol. Siren ignored them. "Your ultimatum assumes that we have the power to hand over Dr. Hallworth," she continued. "But the truth is more complicated. The truth is simple," Torvex growled. "The human scientist is on that station, and you will deliver him to us." "He is on the station," Siren agreed. "But he has claimed sanctuary under the Galactic Refugee Convention, and Station Commander Vorath cannot legally hand him over without a tribunal hearing." "We do not recognize your conventions," Torvex said. "No, but 12 other species do, and 7 of them have warships within 2 weeks of this position," Siren said. "So perhaps we should discuss what the Keth Dominion truly wants, and whether there is a way to achieve it without starting a war that will cost you more than you can afford to pay." The chamber went very quiet. Nethri watched the human female with growing interest, and he noticed things that the older officers seemed to miss. He noticed that she never looked directly at the guards, but always seemed to know exactly where they were standing. He noticed that she sat with her back to the wall and her path to the exit always clear. He noticed that her eyes moved constantly, reading faces and body language with a precision that seemed almost mechanical. This was not a junior diplomatic attach. This was something else entirely. "You speak boldly for someone with no power," Torvex said at last. Siren smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Admiral, I am a human," she said. "My species has no great fleets and no ancient alliances and no significant political weight in this sector of the galaxy." She paused and let the words hang in the air. "But we do have one thing that other species consistently underestimate," she continued. "And what is that?" Torvex demanded. Siren's smile faded, and what remained was something cold and patient and utterly without fear. "We survive," she said. "No matter what it takes, no matter what we have to become. We survive." Back in her quarters on the station, Siren opened a hidden compartment in her luggage and stared at the equipment inside. 15 years since she had touched any of it. 15 years since she had been anyone other than a simple diplomat with a simple life. Her shoulder ached where the old scar tissue pulled against her muscles, and she remembered the last time she had felt this particular kind of fear. Not fear of death, fear of who she might have to become to prevent it. She closed the compartment and sat in darkness. And somewhere in the void, 500 warships waited to destroy everything she had sworn to protect.